Honestly, I can't even explain why I'm sharing this with strangers. Maybe it's because I've kept all this crap bottled up for so long, or maybe it's because no matter how much I try to let it go, I just can't stop replaying it all in my mind. It's like a movie that keeps playing on repeat, over and over. And it's one of those twisted, messed up plots you think could never happen to someone like me. So where do I even start? I guess I should give you some background first. Sophie and I were together for almost a decade, married for 7 years. We lived in a decent suburb just outside Chicago, in a nice house with great neighbors, the whole white picket fence thing. From the outside, people probably thought I had the perfect life. Hell, I used to think that too. I worked my ass off to get where I am, climbed the corporate ladder, built a reputation, earned respect from my coworkers. We had the kind of life everyone else probably envied. Or so it seemed. But let's be real for a second. It's always the ones who seem the happiest on the outside, right? Deep down, I had a feeling something was off. Call it a gut instinct, whatever you want. For months, I could feel a shift. Sophie wasn't the same woman I'd married. She used to be sweet and caring, someone I thought would always have my back. But slowly, she turned cold, distant. She started staying late at work more often, claiming there were new projects or tight deadlines. First, I bought it. She's always been driven by her career, and I respected that. But then she started coming home, barely speaking to me, going straight to bed without so much as a goodnight kiss. That should have been my first clue. Intimacy? Forget it. I honestly can't remember the last time we were even close like that before all this started. And I get it. People drift apart sometimes. But this felt different. It wasn't just about the lack of sex. It was the way she looked at me. It was like I was a stranger to her, someone she had to put up with. The woman who used to light up when I walked into the room now looked at me with dead eyes, like she was wishing she was anywhere but here. Hell, maybe even with someone else. But don't get me wrong. I'm not an idiot. I tried talking to her about it, asking if something was wrong or if I'd done something to upset her. She'd always brush it off, saying she was just tired or stressed from work, that it wasn't me. But her words didn't line up with what I was seeing. And that's when I started paying closer attention. The late-night texts, the business trips that kept popping up, and the way she'd guard her phone like it was some kind of secret treasure. Then one night, I'm sitting at my computer, minding my own business, catching up on emails. Out of nowhere, an anonymous email pops up in my inbox. No subject, no explanation, just a damn photo. I open it, and my heart practically stops. There she is, my wife, kissing some guy at what looks like a party. First I thought, no way, this has to be a prank. Someone messing with me. But the universe wasn't done kicking me in the gut. A couple of days later, I get another email. This time, it's not just a photo. It's a full video. Watching it felt like someone was tearing my soul apart. It was Sophie, no doubt about it, in some dingy hotel room, half naked with some stranger. I couldn't even make it through the whole thing. I thought I was going to throw up. But I'm a logical guy, right? I needed to be absolutely sure before I did something I couldn't take back. So I hired a private detective. Yeah, maybe it sounds paranoid, but when you catch your wife on video with another guy, you want to be sure there's no mistake. The detective didn't waste any time. Within a week, he brought me more evidence. Sophie had been seeing this guy regularly, meeting up after work, sometimes even traveling with him to God knows where. And here's the kicker, it wasn't just one guy. This had been going on for months, maybe longer. I felt like an idiot. All those late nights at the office were just her excuse to cheat on me. But you know what? As angry as I was, as much as I wanted to scream, I still wasn't ready for the worst part. The detective dug even deeper. And that's when he found out one of her lovers was someone I never would have expected. My dad. Richard. How do you even process something like that? The man I looked up to, who I thought was the picture of loyalty to my mom, had been sleeping with my wife behind my back. It was like the ground beneath me cracked open. I lost all trust, not just in Sophie, but in my father too. The two people I trusted most in the world had stabbed me in the back in the worst way possible. And to top it off, my dad was the one who always gave me lectures about loyalty and commitment. What a hypocrite. But here's the kicker, I didn't confront either of them right away. I don't know why, but something told me to wait. Maybe I wanted to see just how deep this thing went. Maybe I was too stunned to react. So I kept quiet, played dumb. I wanted to see how far they'd take it. If I was going to do something, I wanted to make sure they'd pay for every single lie, every single betrayal. So yeah, I started keeping an eye on them. Not literally, but I paid attention to the little things. The glances between Sophie and my dad at family dinners. The secret smiles when they thought no one was watching. I was done being the oblivious husband, the clueless son. They thought they were so clever, but I had the proof. Now, I just had to figure out the perfect way to use it. After everything I found out about Sophie and my father, I honestly thought I was going to lose my mind. Every part of me wanted to confront them both, tear their lives apart like they'd done to mine. But for some reason, something held me back. Maybe it was that sick part of me that wanted to see just how far they were willing to go. Or maybe I wanted to punish them without them even realizing what was coming. I decided to keep things cool, if you can even call it that. I didn't throw my stuff out, didn't yell at Sophie, didn't drop a single hint that I knew everything. Instead, I did the exact opposite. I went on like nothing was wrong, keeping up the same old routine, acting like I was still the Ethan she thought she knew, reliable, steady, and always there. But inside, I was rotting. Every smile I forced, every word I said, just felt like a lie. The anger was brewing, turning into something darker with every passing day. I started staying late at work. At first, it was just to avoid her. Avoiding that face I used to love, the one I couldn't look at without feeling like I might snap. I'd stay late, picking up extra projects that didn't matter to me at all, just so I didn't have to face the lie of pretending things were fine at home. But after a while, I started to enjoy it. Every hour I spent away from her, every late night at the office, meant one more night Sophie was left alone, maybe wondering if I was starting to figure things out. It was petty, yeah, but it was like playing a game, a twisted kind of chess. I wanted to see how she'd react if I started pulling away, if I became the one who didn't seem to care anymore, if I let her feel what I had been feeling all this time. And guess what? She noticed. Suddenly, she was acting like the concerned wife again, asking why I wasn't around for dinner, why I wasn't home on the weekends. I just threw some bullshit excuses at her. Big project at work. Or, I'm too tired. Let's talk later. Simple as that. Then one night, she tried to make things real. I had just gotten back from another late night at the office. But it wasn't work that was wearing me out. It was carrying the weight of everything I knew. Sophie sat me down on the couch and said, "Ethan, we need to talk." She looked like she was struggling to keep it together, which almost made me laugh. She was the one who'd turned our marriage into a joke. And now she was the one shaking. She started with the whole personal problems line. Like that wasn't vague and rehearsed. She said it like I didn't already know what had been going on for months. I just nodded, kept my expression blank, and let her hang herself with her own words. "I've been feeling disconnected," she said. "Like something's missing."
Yeah, no kidding, Sophie.
"Maybe it's all the men you've been sneaking around with." I didn't press her for more. Why bother? I just wanted to see if she'd slip, if she'd admit what she'd done. But of course, she danced around it, like she was hoping I'd play the dumb husband, the one who couldn't see the truth. Well, I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I just shrugged and said, "Yeah, I've been busy. Maybe that's what's causing this. Whatever it is." I could see the frustration building in her eyes, but I didn't care. If she wanted honesty, she should have asked for it before she started betraying me. And it wasn't just Sophie I had to deal with. My father, Jesus, Richard, was still playing the part of the doting dad, pretending like nothing had changed. Every time we were together, whether at a family dinner or at work, he'd flash that fatherly smile like I didn't know what he had done. But I couldn't even look at him. I avoided his calls, kept my responses short, and flat out refused to meet him for drinks like we used to. Soon enough, he noticed. One day, he pulled me aside at the office, trying to get me to open up. "Is something wrong, son?" he asked, his voice dripping with that fake concern that made my blood boil. I wanted to scream at him, tell him what a piece of shit he was, but I kept it together. "Everything's fine, Dad. Just busy with work," I lied. I saw the hurt flash in his eyes, But I didn't care. This was just the beginning. Now, I'm not proud of what I'm about to say, but when you're in pain, you do some stupid shit to try to fill the emptiness. I started going out, meeting other women. It wasn't about seeking some deep emotional connection. Hell no. I just needed a distraction. Anything to take my mind off the wreckage of my life, even if it was just for a night. I'd meet these women at bars, let them buy me drinks, feed me compliments, and then take them back to my place. The sex? It was fine. But it wasn't about passion. It was about control. For a few hours, I could forget about Sophie, forget about my father, forget about the disaster my life had become. But afterward, I felt empty. These women weren't Sophie, and I didn't want them to be, but they also weren't enough to fill whatever was missing inside me. And just when I thought Sophie was too self-absorbed to notice, she finally did. She must have sensed that something had changed between us. One night, after weeks of me avoiding her, she trapped me in the kitchen. She looked at me with those fake tears and said, "Ethan, I need to tell you something." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, ready for whatever lie she was about to spill. Then, for the first time in a while, she actually surprised me. She said it. "I've been unfaithful. No begging for forgiveness, no tears, no trying to justify it. Just a weak excuse about how she'd felt neglected and unhappy." Neglected, I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or maybe you were just horny?" Her face twisted, and for a second, I thought she was going to slap me. But she didn't. She just stood there, looking pathetic, like she was waiting for me to comfort her. I didn't. I turned around and walked away. She had no idea that I already knew everything. That I knew about my dad, about all the other men she'd been with, about the whole sickening mess she'd been running behind my back. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing how deeply she'd hurt me. Not yet, because when I finally decided to tear everything down, I was going to do it on my terms. Holding all of this in started to take its toll. I tried to act normal, but every day felt like I was swallowing broken glass just to get through it. Sophie, with her fake smiles and hollow apologies, thinking I was too stupid to see through her act, and my father still trying to play the role of the perfect dad. It was enough to make me sick. I wasn't about to let them off easy. No way. If they thought they could ruin my life and walk away unscathed, they were sorely mistaken. Confronting them privately, one-on-one, too simple, too quiet. I wanted them to feel the humiliation I was drowning in, but I wanted it to be on a grand scale. So I started planning. I gathered everything I had, emails, photos, videos, the whole damn mess. I even called the detective one last time to dig deeper into Sophie's other affairs. If I was going to burn her down, I wanted enough evidence to bury her. And my father? I wasn't about to let him slink away and pretend nothing had happened. No way. He was going down with her. I needed a stage, something big. Then it hit me, Sophie's birthday was coming up. Every year we threw this big party at our place, inviting friends, family, colleagues. A perfect opportunity to expose her for the snake she was. She'd never see it coming. The night of the party, I played the part of the devoted husband. I smiled. I laughed. I acted like everything was perfect. Sophie was basking in the attention, thinking she'd gotten away with it all. She had no idea that I had rigged the whole evening to become her worst nightmare. I waited until the drinks had flowed freely, people were laughing, chatting, everyone in a good mood. That's when I stood up, glass in hand, ready to make a toast. I can still remember the look on Sophie's face when I started speaking. At first, confusion flashed in her eyes, and then a nervous tension set in when she realized I wasn't giving some lovey-dovey speech. "I've always prided myself on being honest," I said, my voice steady. "And I think it's time for all of us to be honest tonight, especially with so many of our closest friends and family here." I could see my father's eyes narrow, and Sophie? She went white as a ghost. I didn't waste any time. I pulled out my phone, hooked it up to the TV in the living room, and pressed play. The video, the one of Sophie half-naked, getting cozy with some other guy in a hotel room. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. When it ended, I just stood there, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Sophie tried to talk her way out of it, stammering that it was a mistake, that she'd been going through a tough time, but no one was buying it. Our friends whispered to each other, their faces twisted in disgust. Her colleagues, the ones who used to look up to us as the perfect couple, shook their heads in disbelief. I could feel her world crumbling right in front of me. Then I turned to my father. Richard, care to explain why you thought it was a good idea to screw your son's wife? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, frozen, like I just punched him in the gut. I laid it all out for everyone, about how he'd been sneaking around with Sophie, all while pretending to be the supportive, loving father. It hit everyone like a ton of bricks. The party ended in chaos. People scrambled to leave, uncomfortable whispers filling the air. Sophie grabbed at my arm, pleading, but I just shook her off. We're done, I said, cold as ice. I'll send you the divorce papers. I didn't need to hear her excuses. At that point, I didn't care. As for my father, he wasn't done yet. He tried to corner me afterward, followed me out to the driveway, begging me to listen. It was a mistake, son, he kept saying. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but I didn't give a damn. I wasn't listening to his excuses anymore. You lost the right to call me son the moment you decided to screw my wife. I spat at him. From that moment on, he was dead to me. I cut him out of my life completely. Our business partnership? Gone. Family dinners? Not a chance. I made sure everyone knew exactly what he'd done. He tried to salvage what he could, but it was too late. His reputation was destroyed, just like mine had been. But here's the thing, I didn't get the satisfaction I thought I would. I thought by exposing them, I'd finally feel some kind of relief, some kind of victory. But no, all I felt was empty. It was like I had burned my life to the ground, and I was standing in the ashes. At least they were burning with me. You'd think after that I'd be done. I'd already wrecked Sophie's reputation and destroyed my father's life in front of everyone we knew. But once you start down that path, it's hard to stop. It's like a drug. Watching them squirm, trying to piece their lives back together, it became an addiction. And I wasn't ready to let them have even a shred of peace. So I took it to the next level. I created fake social media accounts. Yeah, I know it's petty, but at that point, I didn't care. Posing as my father, I started posting cryptic, suggestive messages aimed at Sophie. Things like, I miss our nights together. And you know you can't resist me. It was subtle, just enough to get people talking, but not enough to get flagged. And oh, did it work? Sophie's phone started blowing up. Texts from her friends, her coworkers, all trying to get the inside scoop. She denied it, of course, claiming it was some troll messing with her. But the damage was done. People believe the worst about you when your reputation is already in tatters. The whispers started at her office, and soon enough, she was getting side-eye from everyone she knew. I knew I was driving her insane, and that's exactly what I wanted. Every time she tried to clear her name, I'd drop another message or a fake screenshot, making it look like she was just digging herself deeper. Watching her life unravel piece by piece was glorious. But I wasn't done with my father. One day, I told him we needed to meet up. He was desperate to talk, hoping I'd finally let it go. Maybe even consider reconciliation. But I had other plans. We met at a crowded restaurant downtown. As soon as he walked in, I could see the relief on his face. He thought maybe I was finally coming around. But the moment he sat down, I let him have it. I didn't keep my voice down either. So, how was fucking my wife behind my back? I asked. Did she feel better than mom? Heads turned. The place went dead quiet. He tried to hush me, whispering that we should take this outside. But I wasn't about to let him off that easy. I couldn't help myself. I spilled everything, laying out every filthy detail for everyone to hear. You know what's ironic? I said, my voice cutting through the tension. All those times you lectured me about being a good husband, about loyalty, and here you were, sleeping with my wife. He stammered, fumbling for some weak excuse, trying to claim it was a mistake, that he was going through a tough time. But nobody was buying it. The whole restaurant had frozen, eyes glued to us. Some people already pulling out their phones, probably recording the scene. It was pure chaos, and I was loving every second of it. I turned and walked out, leaving him there in front of everyone, humiliated, knowing full well he'd never live that down. But that was only the beginning. I had plans for his business next. I knew a few of his partners, had met them at some events over the years, and it didn't take much to start planting seeds of doubt. A few well-timed emails, some anonymous tips about shady deals, nothing too obvious, but enough to get people questioning. I leaked a bit of confidential info, small stuff that could be traced back to him if anyone cared to dig. Sure enough, one of his major deals collapsed. I heard through the grapevine that his partners were pulling out, not wanting to associate with someone whose reputation was in freefall. He tried to deny it, of course, but the damage had already been done. Once suspicion spreads, you can't undo it. As for Sophie, I wasn't about to let her off easy either. I had more dirt to dish out. I started sending anonymous letters to her workplace, exposing her affairs, complete with screenshots and dates. I even included some financial discrepancies I'd uncovered by going through her things. She'd been skimming money from her partner's accounts, using work trips as cover to meet her boyfriends. It didn't take long before her bosses caught wind of it. The office that had once hailed her as a rising star now treated her like a leper. She was demoted, stripped of her team, and last I heard, she was doing menial work just to keep her job. But every time I thought about how I'd ruined her, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. I thought I'd experience a rush of triumph, but instead, all I felt was emptiness. I tried to fill that void with random women. I'd meet them at bars, strike up conversations, take them back to my place. But it was hollow. I wasn't after anything meaningful, just a distraction. It was like scratching an itch that didn't go away. Eventually, the women started noticing. They'd tell me I was distant, detached, like I wasn't really there. And they were right. My mind was still fixated on revenge, not on anything real. One of them even told me, "You're not over your ex, are you?" I laughed it off, but deep down, I knew she was right. I wasn't over any of it. Every night, I'd replay everything in my head, trying to convince myself I was winning, that I was getting the last laugh. But really, I was just sinking deeper into this pit I dug for myself. Sophie, Richard, all of them. I thought watching them crumble would bring me some sense of relief. But all I felt was this overwhelming emptiness. It was like staring into an abyss, knowing that no matter how many people I dragged down with me, it wouldn't change anything. But at that point, I was too far gone. Couldn't stop. The only thing I could do was keep going, hoping somewhere along the way, I'd finally feel alive again. After months of living in rage and revenge, I was drained. But I wasn't ready to admit that to myself. I just knew I couldn't keep going this way. I was burning through women, friends, business connections, hell, even my own sanity. Then I met Sarah. Sarah was nothing like the women I'd been sleeping with. She wasn't looking for a quick fling or a distraction. She was just real. We worked at the same company, and I'd seen her around, but we'd never really spoken until one night after a work event. I stayed late, as usual, trying to avoid going back to my empty, wrecked apartment. She was there too, nursing a glass of wine, so I figured, why not strike up a conversation for once? Turned out, she had her own demons. She'd been cheated on too, by her fiancé, just before they were supposed to get married. We ended up talking for hours, sharing stories of betrayal and all the pain that comes with it. For the first time in a long while, I felt understood. I didn't have to fake anything with her. She got it. Every twisted thought, every bit of anger. Before long, we were spending more and more time together. What started as late-night office talks turned into weekend coffee dates, then dinners. There was something about her that felt safe, I guess. She wasn't trying to fix me, but she didn't judge me either. It was the first time I'd let myself feel something real since everything fell apart with Sophie. Sarah pushed me to try therapy. At first, I thought it was a joke. Sitting in some stranger's office and talking about my problems wasn't going to fix anything. But Sarah kept on me, and I agreed to go, mostly just to get her off my back. And, I'll admit, the sessions weren't completely useless. I started to realize how much the anger I'd been carrying was slowly eating me alive. Sure, I'd gotten my revenge, but it wasn't making me feel better. It was just making me bitter and lonely. Sarah and I grew closer, really close. We even went away for a weekend together to this cozy cabin she found. But here's the thing. Even when I was with her, my mind kept drifting back to Sophie and Richard. Every time Sarah reached for my hand, every time I saw that hopeful look in her eyes, all I could think of was the betrayal I'd suffered. She noticed. She wasn't dumb. She'd catch me staring off into space or zoning out whenever something reminded me of the past. She tried to be patient, but eventually, she pushed me for answers. "Ethan, are you really over this?" she asked one night, after I went quiet for the 100th time. "Or are you just using me as a distraction?" I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I was ready to move on. But the truth was I wasn't. I was still stuck. I was still obsessed with Sophie, still replaying all the shit she'd done, still wishing she'd get what was coming to her. No matter how good Sarah was to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was using her as a crutch, just to prop myself up while I drowned in my bitterness. Things hit a boiling point when Sarah and I went on that trip together. I thought it would be the perfect escape, a change of scenery to help me leave the past behind. But instead, it only made everything worse. Every beautiful moment, every peaceful sunset by the lake, felt tainted by thoughts of Sophie. I couldn't stop comparing everything to the life I had before, the life that had been shattered. I could see Sarah noticing, trying to be patient, but every time I pulled away, I saw the hurt in her eyes. It was slowly eating at her. The tipping point came during dinner at a restaurant. We were talking about something trivial when I looked up, and there he was, one of Sophie's former lovers, sitting a few tables away, laughing like nothing was wrong. In that moment I froze. The food in front of me lost all appeal. All I could think about was confronting him, tearing into him right there in front of everyone. But instead, I just sat there, staring at my plate, gripping my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. Sarah noticed the change immediately. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. But I couldn't speak. My thoughts were racing, my heart was pounding, and all I could feel was this overwhelming surge of rage. That bastard had been a part of the reason everything had fallen apart, and here he was, sitting there carefree. I could barely hear Sarah's voice as she kept asking what was going on. That moment hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized right then that I was still completely consumed by my past. No matter how hard I tried to move forward, no matter how hard Sarah had tried to help me, I was still chained to my desire for revenge. I wanted Sophie, Richard, and everyone who had been involved in this mess to suffer. And Sarah? She deserved more than to be with a man still trapped by his own demons. I excused myself, claiming I needed some air. Sarah didn't press me, but I saw the disappointment in her eyes. I walked out of that restaurant without a second glance. And deep down, I knew I was facing a choice. Either let go of my past or lose any chance I had left at happiness. But at that moment, all I could think about was how much I still wanted to destroy the people who had ruined everything for me. After everything that had gone down, you'd think I'd be worn out, ready to let it go. But instead, I found myself planning one final act of destruction. One last strike to completely wreck Richard and Sophie's lives. Couldn't walk away. I kept telling myself I was almost there, that I'd feel better once I finished what I started. Then came the final blow. I uncovered their last betrayal. As if ruining me emotionally wasn't enough, they had been plotting to sell off the one thing I had left, my property. They were planning to use the proceeds to fund their escape plan, to run away together once everything settled down. I found the emails on Sophie's old laptop. They'd been discussing how to forge my signature, how to sell it off without me ever knowing until it was too late. I felt like an absolute fool. For all this time, I thought the affair was the worst of it. But it ran deeper. They had been trying to rob me blind, take away the one thing that still meant something to me, and leave me with nothing but the wreckage of my life. That's when I decided, no more games. No more subtle revenge. This time, I was going all out. I gathered everything I had, every scrap of evidence, every photo, every video, all the emails proving their plan to sell off my property, and I made sure it got out. I posted it everywhere. Social media, every platform, every outlet I could think of. I sent it to journalists, local news, even the gossip blogs. If they thought they could get away with it and keep their dirty little secret, they were sorely mistaken. The response was swift. My phone lit up with messages, calls, and emails from people asking if it was true. Richard's business partners began pulling away, cutting ties to distance themselves from the scandal. Sophie's workplace had no choice but to fire her once the fraud I uncovered hit the fan. Watching everything fall apart was strangely satisfying. I watched it all from my couch, sipping a drink like I was watching some sort of twisted reality show, as their lives crumbled. But here's the thing, it didn't feel like a win. Sure, I had gotten what I wanted. I had dragged their names through the mud, shattered their reputations, and ruined whatever future they thought they'd have together. But once the dust settled, it was just quiet, empty. I sat there, alone in that same apartment I used to share with Sophie, surrounded by everything I'd lost. And then there was Sarah. I didn't deserve her. She had stuck by me through my madness, trying to help me climb out of the hole I'd dug for myself. But even she had limits. When she saw what I'd done, how far I'd gone to get revenge on Sophie and Richard, she just shook her head. "You're still not over it, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with disappointment. "You can't keep living like this, chasing revenge. It's only going to destroy you." I tried to argue, to tell her that this was closure, that I needed this to move on. But she wasn't buying it. The next morning, she was gone. And that was the end of it. Now I was truly alone. The revenge I thought would set me free had only kept me chained. I kept thinking about that saying people like to toss around, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." But nobody ever tells you that once it's served, you're left with nothing but the cold. I thought about reaching out to Sarah, maybe trying to fix things, but I knew it was too late. I had pushed away the one person who truly cared. I was back to square one, but now there was no more revenge to focus on, no more targets to destroy. Just me, and the mess I had made of my life. Took me a while to figure it out, but eventually, I came to the painful realization that if I wanted to get out of this hell, I had to forgive. Not for them, no way. They didn't deserve it. But for me, holding on to that anger, that hatred, it was like drinking poison and hoping they'd be the ones to die. I had to let it go, even if it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I stopped checking their social media, stopped asking mutual friends about them. I deleted the emails, the photos, everything I'd been using to feed my anger. It was like ripping off a bandage that had been stuck for far too long. It hurt like hell, but it was necessary. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I still remember every betrayal, every lie, every sleepless night wondering how they could have done this to me. But I couldn't let it define me anymore. I had to stop letting them live rent-free in my head. Now I'm trying to live for myself. I'm not saying I'm suddenly healed or anything. I'm still broken in a lot of ways. But at least now, I'm not letting that brokenness control me. I've started therapy again. Not for Sarah, not for anyone else, but for me. I'm trying to figure out who I am, outside of the rage, outside of the bitterness. Maybe one day, I'll be able to look back at all of this without feeling that sting. Maybe I won't. But for now, I'm just taking it one day at a time. Because, as it turns out, the real victory wasn't in tearing them down. It was in letting go and trying to rebuild whatever was left of me.